Good evening and welcome to the Chatham Select Board meeting on November 16th, 2021. My name is Peter Kokolis. I'm Chair of the Chatham Select Board. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please let me know. Seeing none, pursuant to Governor Baker's June 16, 2021 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and that's General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until April 1st, 2022, this meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted both in person and via remote for public participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while it is in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. Conference ID is 134-208-476#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. So, welcome again, everyone. Just a reminder to please mute your mic and turn off your cameras until you're acknowledged or speaking at the podium. I'll do a roll call first. Board Member Shireen Davis is not with us tonight, and I know that our Select Board Member Dykins is going to be a little bit late. So, having said that, Board Member Metters.
Present.
Board Member Nicastro.
Present.
And the chair is present. Just to go over some of the process that we're going to use tonight, it's going to be relatively simple. I do have one small change. We're going to start with our minutes. Then we'll get into public announcements and agenda item requests. That's when, if you want us to talk about something at a future date, this is the time to do it, or to make a comment about what's happened in the town. We'll then have new business, coronavirus. We have an update today? Yeah. We'll do a coronavirus update. The next part, which is public comments on our business agenda, I'm going to be moving that to the after our public hearings. The public hearings are going to, they may take a little bit of time, and rather than have people come up and speak about an agenda item that's 30 minutes away, I put it after the public hearings. So after the coronavirus update, we'll do a first public hearing, which is a utility pole hearing. Second public hearing is on tree requests, and that's a continuation of one that was done previously. Then we will have comments on the agenda items that follow. The first will be first night. Second is the Select Board and Town Manager goals and objectives. And then finally, the Budget Summit. We are in the process of developing our next budget. And then we'll go into an executive session on two issues. One is has to do with a multi-district PFAS litigation, and the second is collective bargaining strategy. So with that, let's go through the minutes. Minutes for November 2nd, 2021.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments or none? Okay. Let's take a vote on November 16th minutes.
November 2nd.
Pardon?
November 2nd?
November 2nd.
Yep.
November 2nd. That's right. Sorry. We have a motion. We have a second. Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Nicastro.
Aye.
And the chair says aye. That'll take us into our public announcements and agenda item requests. I see people here that might want, I know the guys over there do, okay. You have to go up to the mic. It should be on, and you can take your mask off if you want, but just let us know. Anybody else have an agenda item request? No? Okay, once we do this, I'll ask the virtual audience. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Stan Mansfield. I'm a member of the so-called think tank group that's been studying the senior center issue for the last couple of months, and I would like to ask to be placed on the agenda for the select board meeting right after Thanksgiving to make a presentation, a short presentation.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if I can guarantee it November 30th, but we'll get it on there. Anyone else? I didn't go to the board first, and that was my error, but I don't see any other hands. I have a couple, and then I'll get over to the board. The first one is, we had a public forum on the senior center last week. I just want to make a comment that I thought it went pretty well, very well. We had a lot of people that made that participated both virtually and in the room. I just appreciate what everyone did. Thank you for doing it, and we'll be getting back with a synopsis of that at a future board meeting in the near future with the COA. Second thing is, you should, I don't know if you've watched the news about, never mind about inflation, but our energy prices. Energy prices are going to probably go up. I'm not sure how much, but more. Cape Light Compact is looking at what their rates are going to be, so is Eversource. The cost of energy, especially for gas, which we use a lot of to develop our energy, has gone up considerably. So I just want to make an announcement. If you haven't done, or if you haven't done one in the near future, might be a good time to get an energy audit for your house. That's one way to at least help cut your costs. But we'll get back. I'll get back to you with what the costs will be, probably in early December, mid-December. And then finally, for the board, before I go on, next week's agenda, I'd like to make it virtually because of, well, you have at least one person who's going to be virtual, and it's right before the holidays. Do we have any comment, any questions, or would you, any problems with that? Yeah. Corey, if that's all right, then what we'll do is we'll be all virtual next week on Tuesday of next week, just like we were before, okay? Now, back to the board. Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an agenda item request. I was approached recently by some folks that are trying to organize a theatrical event to return a live, professional, and amateur theater to the town of Chatham since the closing of the Monomoy Theater, and had a conversation with Alan Rust, the director of the former artistic director of the Monomoy Theater, and they're putting together a project to have a Shakespeare in Chatham Festival at Kate Gould Park in July and August of this year, and the hope is that that would become an annual event. And it would be free in the open air, and it would mark the return of a summer professional and training theater to Chatham. And although they will have to go before the Park and Rec Commission for permission to use Kate Gould Park, and I guess will come before us at some point, perhaps for an entertainment permit, if that's in order. I'd like to request as an agenda item that we invite Mr. Rust and whoever else might wish to join him to make give us an informational preview of what they're planning. It's going to be called the Shakespeare in Chatham Festival, I guess, and it's, I think, a very encouraging development considering the closure of the Monomoy Theater and the desire of many people in Chatham to have live. I know we have the Chatham Drama Guild. This would be a sort of a return of the combination professional / training type theater program that Mr. Rust and others were so successful in leading for so many years here in Chatham. So I'd like to have an opportunity for them to come and give the public and give us a preview of what they're planning at some board meeting in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. Corey, no? Any other public announcements? I don't see any online. We'll move on then to our coronavirus update. Jill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we did not have Dr. Bob available or Judy Giorgio, our health agent, but Judy did give me a brief update that I would like to read. So, and there's no graphics, so it's just me. So Chatham has a total of 422 cases since the inception, where we started keeping track of it, and that was March of 2020. The incident rate for the past 2-week period is at 8.6, and that's up from 6.1 from the previous 2-week period. Positivity rate for the past 2-week period is 3.5, and that's up from 2.09 from the previous period. So to date, November of 2021, we've had 16 cases, of which 11 were vaccinated persons and 5 either not vaccinated or unknown. And last November 2020, we had a total of 13 cases. The Barnstable County incident rate is currently at 17.7, and the positivity rate is at 3.67, and again, that's for Barnstable County as a whole. The Health Division is working on setting up a pediatric COVID vaccine clinic with the VNA at the elementary school, and also working to arrange booster vaccines for homebound residents, Chatham Housing Authority, and Park Place. And that concludes our report.
Thank you, Jill. Any comments from the board? Any public comments? And I don't see anything on virtually. So let's move straight into our public hearings. First one is a utility poll hearing. And we have a public announcement on that. Corey?
Town of Chatham Select Board, public hearing notice. The Chatham Select Board will hold a public hearing at 5:30 PM on Tuesday, November 16th, 2021, to consider a joint petition from Verizon New England Incorporated and NStar Electric Company, DBA Eversource Energy, to place one jointly owned stub pole 76-16S on the southeast side of Sam Ryder Road, across the street from number 115, to accommodate solar project on Middle Road. The public is welcome to attend the meeting in person or participate via a link in the meeting's posted agenda or by calling 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 134208-476#. All interested parties are encouraged to attend. Signed, members of the Select Board.
Thank you, Corey. Do we have anybody from Eversource? Welcome. Introduce yourself and we'll get in it.
Good evening, Tom Stanton representing Verizon. And this is a request from Eversource for Verizon to set a stub pole for their solar project.
Okay. Do you have any questions for the board? Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Mr. Stanton. Nice to see you again. We received an email from Mr. Temple with a number of questions that he had raised, and I just wondered if they had been resolved. Let me read from it. I don't know if is there anyone here from DPW?
I don't see him
Okay.
online.
Okay. So he says this would be located outside of the town's right-of-way and on private property. He has a question mark. Is that correct? It's going to be on private property?
I thought it was on the town taking. When I looked at it. I don't know what the taking is there, but the drawing shows that it is in the town taking.
Let me just look at the drawing. No. It would appear to be. I don't know why he's asking that question. This is an email dated October 21st. Then he says, assuming the distance between the existing and proposed utility lines is incorrect, maybe he means correct on the sketch. Based off their sketch, the proposed utility pole 7616S may be in conflict with the town's existing 8-inch water main, located in the shoulder area, which appears to be 3 to 5 feet off the white, it says fog line, adjacent to the edge of the pavement. I just wondered if, do you know anything about that?
I don't know if there's a water main there,
Yeah.
no.
How urgent is it that you have a decision this evening? Do you, I mean,
It's
I
up to
just
you,
wondered
sir.
if we,
It's up to you.
I mean, I'd like to get Mr. Temple's comment on whether these questions have been answered before we decide. And there would perhaps be a week's delay. Is that possible, Jill, or am I making too much out of this? I read his memo and,
Yeah, I know that the DPW director, Tom, had the packet, and I don't know if I wasn't aware that there are any further issues or the issues have been rectified, but that you don't have it, I can certainly email it to you, his original comments, if that helps.
well, this is this is the 21st of October, we're in the 15th of November, so,
If it's a water main issue, we could always hand dig the pole.
yeah, okay. Okay.
Corey? And before that, Corey, welcome, Jeff. Jeff Dykens
Well-
back. Yeah.
For basically a procedural question, I won't dig into, I was going to ask the same questions. There was a number of questions that were asked by DPW Director Tom Temple, and I didn't know what the responses or answers were. So I'm comfortable continuing this for a week if we can get these answers, because I don't want to leave too many open-ended issues, because there are several questions here, and I feel far more comfortable if we had actual answers to them.
Did Mr. Temple send these requests to Verizon?
This was from Tom Temple, sent on October 21st, 2021, to Samantha Tranghow.
Frangies?
That's internal, that's
Internal,
Sam.
okay.
Yeah, there was an internal memo. Unfortunately, we don't, so you wouldn't have seen it,
Right.
and we don't have an answer. I mean, if you needed a decision tonight, I wouldn't.
That's fine.
I
No,
wouldn't press on
No,
this.
that's fine. We can wait a week.
You're okay?
Well, Ms.
Jeff?
Mr.
Yeah, I
Dykens
would
wants-
suggest that Mr. Temple send the questions that he raised here directly to Verizon rather than to us. It's on.
I would just suggest that Mr. Temple send these questions directly to Verizon rather than to us. We can't answer the question. He raised issues, but only Verizon can answer them.
Yeah. Okay, we need a motion to continue.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue this hearing for 1 week to November the 22nd, right? 22nd?
23rd.
23rd, you're correct, sorry.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second? Okay, any discussion? You're okay with that? Okay, let me take a vote. Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the next public hearing is on our tree removal. And Corey, let's read it again, even though it's a continuation of before.
Continuation of a continuation. All righty. Chatham Select Board, notice a public hearing for tree removal. As required by Mass General Law, Chapter 87, the Chatham Select Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, at 5:30 PM in the Town Hall Annex located at 261 George Ryder Road, Chatham, Mass., to consider a request from Eversource Electric to remove trees along part of the Middle Road, to install utility poles and lines to connect to the new solar farm. The meeting will be conducted in person and with remote participation via Microsoft Teams. For remote participation, please click the link below or call the number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 134-208-476#. Signed Daniel L. Tobin, our tree warden, and this was obviously continued until today.
Thank you, Corey. Okay, this is a continuation, as we noticed, of tree discussion. I noticed Dan Tobin came in. If you'd like to start, Dan, while you're going up there, we have some Eversource representatives that are here that, once Dan gets through, you could introduce him if they care to speak? And then we have, I know we have at least a couple of public people that want to speak, and I have a guy, Dan Young, it will be one of those. Okay, so any comments? Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Good evening. So at your last meeting, or 2 weeks ago, when the last meeting was held, there was a discussion about the proposed cutting that was necessary to install poles and utility lines down to the solar farm on Middle Road coming in from Sam Ryder Road. Mr. Sellers and Mr. Young are here from Eversource to address that issue. They would be the ones that would be, for Eversource, charged with administering that vegetation management program. The ask at your last meeting was to talk about a mitigation replanting plan for that stretch of the road where the trees would need to be removed and the utility lines installed. So they have sent some information on to you. I believe it's within your packet there with what was their proposal for plantings for that, and that's where we sort of resume the meeting and the discussion this evening.
Okay, fine. Let's start with the Eversource folks. Okay. And I think we have a couple online, too. Tiffany Robichaud is online, but she's with Next Grid. Welcome. Introduce yourself again. Nice
Sure.
to see you.
Paul Sellers, Eversource Energy, representing our Vegetation Management Department. And we provided you with some information on a proposed planting plan for Middle Road to mitigate the 60 trees that we propose on removing to accommodate the overhead line structures. So within that, I don't know if you would like me to go through the plant species or?
Please.
So we proposed planting some 30 trees, 5 Cornus mass, which is a great tree that doesn't usually exceed about 35 feet in height. Wonderful spring color, yellow flowers. Cornus rutkin, which is a hybrid of a native dogwood species, but it has a pink flower. Cornus cusa, which has got that great creamy white flower. Perodia persica, which the perodia is a great resilient tree, hardy roadside tree. Again, another tree that generally doesn't exceed 30 feet or so in height. Won't interfere with our power lines in the future. 5 Styrex japonicus, or the Japanese snowbell, another tree with a brilliant display of white flowers in the spring. And 5 Stewardia pseudocamellia. Those are another wonderful plant with a showy display of flowers. Again, not exceeding more than 35 feet in height, making it utility compatible and the right tree for the right place for that type of a planting. Further augmenting the plantings in that area, we propose planting 120 shrubs. The majority of them are all native species. 20 Amelanchier or shadbush, 20 Himalayas witch hazel, 20 Ilex verticulata or winterberry, 20 Ilex glabra, or better known as inkberry, 20 blueberry bushes, high bush blueberry bushes, and then finishing off the complement to that, another 20 viburnum dentatum, arrowwood viburnum. All of those shrubs will vary in height at maturity from anywhere from 6 to 12 feet tall, and provide a kind of a backdrop behind the trees that we propose planting, give a bit more screening to the transfer station area that's behind that area of that pole line. So our goal would be to plant those trees and shrubs in different types of mass plantings. Either the trees would be planted in groups of 3 or 2, and then the shrubs would be planted in blocks of 10, alternating down that 6 pole span area to try and naturalize it and in an attempt to diffuse some of the pole construction and remediate the trees that we removed. We do this in the spring at this point when there's more of an abundance of plant material available, and the trees will be planted using one of our landscape contractors. All of the plants would be mulched in their final planting stage. We'd augment the soil as needed if it appears to be too sandy and not enough organic material. We'd continue to water these plants to get them established through the spring, and we'd additionally guarantee these trees throughout the year in case we needed to replace any if they succumbed or we had some mortality from the initial planting. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have regarding that.
Anything from the board? Do we need to hear from anyone else from Eversource, or if it's? Dean? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Mr. Sellers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And as I recall, you're the arborist, right, for the
I am,
company?
yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask you, when, I think it was 2 hearings ago, because this is the 3rd time I think you've been here.
Second time for me.
Second
You had
time.
the initial poll grant hearing
Okay.
that took place.
I think you may have been the one to mention that one of the problems with the existing trees that are on there is that they're leaning, some of them lean into the roadway.
Right.
And are the types of trees that you're proposing likely to suffer the same fate, or?
No, when we do the initial clearing for the pole span, we're clearing additionally for the cross arm that's above it. It's not just the pole, but the cross arm. So the trees that we plant will be basically directly underneath the center line of that pole span. So they'll have a sufficient amount of light, an area for a growth pattern to take place. So I don't envision that there's any sort of that need for the tree to lean towards the street. Well, it'll have adequate light for growth pattern.
Are they to be planted within the roadway layout, or?
Yeah, they would be planted within the roadway layout. There's enough room there to do that, achieve that, put the poles in, and we'll make an appropriate setback where necessary so it doesn't infringe on the street.
So there are 60 trees there now that you're proposing to eliminate approximately, and you're replacing them with 30 and then a mixture of shrubs. Is there a reason why you're including the shrubs as opposed to an additional number of trees?
Sure. So the way that the trees are growing in a natural state in kind of that wooded environment, none of them are developing any real significant canopies. If you look at a lot of the trees that had a chance to go out there, very singular, skinny. None of them are maturing with a canopy. So we're talking about spacing these out so they have an adequate, growth area to develop and establish themselves. So to kind of mitigate, again, the loss of the other 60 trees, that backdrop of those shrubs to give it kind of a tiered, look. And that the shrubs, I feel, would be more of a screening effect, especially for the transfer station.
And the guarantee is for 1 year. Are you going to maintain them for that first year?
Correct, yes.
Is that the policy of Eversource, or are there times or projects where Eversource continues the maintenance beyond a year?
Generally, we don't actually get involved in too much of the maintenance. If we're engaged with the town or community planting, we'll usually do the planting and the community takes on the maintenance. This is a different situation where we're asking you to remove these trees and put in some of our structures. We're certainly more than happy to look at this area. We look at it as actually an opportunity to kind of push this right tree, right place concept and use it as a demonstration area. So it's something we're going to keep an eye on, not just for the first year, but it's certainly something that myself and the area arborist would be interested in seeing thrive.
Have you done this sort of thing in some other Cape communities?
With new construction we have, we did a large project, I want to say it was at least 3 years ago in Orleans. They had a significant upgrade for circuit upgrades, reliability upgrades, where we had to remove a significant number of trees, install new poles in kind of the same situation where they hadn't been before. And that was the same type of a thing. We worked, that was a slightly different because it covered probably a couple of miles of tree removals that we identified and worked with individual homeowners and we went to those individual homeowners and gave them a selection of trees that they could choose from if they wanted a tree planted or not. So it's a process we've engaged in a number of different communities.
Do you think 1 year's maintenance is enough to get these trees established and shrubs?
It should be. I mean, if the board, if you're uncomfortable with you mind throwing out 1 year, I mean, if 2 years makes you feel more comfortable, where
Okay.
it's not an issue of we're not going to be around. So
Okay. One final question for the moment. I drove by there and looked at the trees you're talking about. There's the ones with the blue ribbons around them.
correct.
Right. This may be a pretty dumb question. Why is it, if the solar array is across the street, why are the trees on the south side instead of the north side of that? Why are the poles on this, I'm sorry, the poles on the south side instead of the north side?
The designer and engineers determined that. Yeah, we actually have a representative from
Sure.
Next Generation here that can
Like to hear that.
speak to some of the engineering.
Well,
and-
maybe when you
Yeah,
speak,
you could get up to the mic and
well, maybe when
Wait,
Mr.
you're not
Sellers is
finished?
finished.
Okay.
I'm done, but maybe others have questions for Mr. Sellers.
I do.
Thank you.
Anybody else
Thank
on
you,
the
sir.
board? No? Well, one thing that was, our planning board has done over a number of years, and when they start talking about taking trees down, and it was sort of released a couple of people on that board. I used to call one of them the tree guy, and he used to call me the light bulb guy, because I was worried about electricity. The point is, they were always arguing for a tree. And part of the issue is not just what you were saying, which makes sense as far as, the physical location. It had to do with the amount of carbon that trees keep and maintain and keep out of the environment. So, as I mentioned the last time, I went down there and looked at all the trees. There's a lot of small ones and whatever, and you're replacing them with trees that, assumingly, they're going to be larger. I don't know if there's a one-for-one replacement because of the carbon that's removed and the carbon that'll be taken out of the air. That's part of the issue that always comes up in Chatham. I don't know if you can comment on that, or whether, whether it's kind of catching you by surprise, but is it an issue you've dealt with before? And it probably will be in the future.
Yeah, I mean, carbon sequestration comes up on occasion. And I don't know of specific formulas that could be used to determine, by species, by diameter class, height, how much one specific tree is going to, take on more carbon than another. There's always a debate that the younger growth is going to do a better job than the older growth. But generally on this one-for-one concept of compensation, then we get into the specific value of each individual tree. So we could spend a lot of time. It's a laborious effort to figure out on each individual tree based, again, on their species, diameter class, value of the tree per its diameter square inch. We can come up with a monetary value. But generally, trees in those kind of woodlot areas that are naturalized, there's a varying degree of decline, regrowth, regeneration. The value is usually pretty low. So we find it more successful when we can come in with a viable plan that will enhance that area and be compatible with the installation of the poles and wires.
Okay, thank you. I guess, why don't you come up and tell us about the engineering part of it, and then we'll go out to the public. Thank you, Mr. Sellers.
Sure. If you don't mind, I'm going to remove my mask. I'm
No, it's
vaccinated.
okay.
Sure.
Perfect.
So my name is Daniel Serber. I'm the development director with NextGrid Inc. So thank you, Select Board, for welcoming me here. So we submitted these plans to the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals in 2019. The site plan review hearing was finalized on February 11th, 2020, which is when we received that permit, and the special permit ZBA, that was on February 27th, 2020. For this project, I visited every home in the surrounding community. I knocked on their doors. I left them packages and my phone number and site plan. The original site plan for this project had the entrance was at the side closest to Sam Ryder Road, and the poles were on our side of the street. One of the big pushbacks we had was from some of the neighbors on West Pond that did not want that entrance as close to their street as it was. So we kept with the original entrance for the Dubus facility. The reason we moved it north was to lessen the amount of run Eversource would have to do to enter the site. So we had all our equipment pads up there closer to West Pond. So we moved those as a response from neighborhood concerns. The other concern was that poles would be on their side of Middle Road. One resident in particular was very adamant, not only during the hearings, but has been calling me often since those hearings to ensure poles would not be placed outside of his kitchen window. As a response, we moved those across the street at our cost. I believe at the last hearing, Eversource said that they are pay for these upgrades, but we actually have paid them close to $200,000 already to do these upgrades. So that cost is coming from us. It is a greater cost to be on the side of the street that we're on and do a road crossing instead of the shorter run than we had originally planned. And we did these changes to appease abutters and the community. We actually got a bit of praise at the public hearing from the ZBA saying that they appreciate that we agreed to these changes so openly, and there was no real public fighting about any of this at the hearing. So the plan and the reason these trees are being cut is a direct response to what was asked for us by both the abutters, the planning board, and the zoning board of appeals. I also want to point out that we're planting more than 120 trees on our site already. We have native trees that are being planted around our ponding basin. We also planted some native trees along our side of Middle Road, as well as some giant green arborvitaes. Additionally, we've planted some giant green arborvitaes on the ridge to block the view of a few homeowners. We've been talking to other homeowners that don't feel like their views are being adequately blocked of the solar field and they're getting some glare, so we've agreed in writing to add more trees in the spring. We anticipate it's going to be about 80 more arborvitaes there in a zigzag. So we're looking at kind of a massive amount of a net positive of trees, not a net negative, even though these are being cut. I know arborvitaes are not a native species, but they're what is needed to adequately block the view of the glare that some of these neighbors have been bringing to my attention. We do have we really want to be good neighbors, and we plan on doing that. Further, this project, was pro forma back in 2019. So we've also survived COVID-19 pandemic, work shortages that have come from that, stop works that have come from that, and then all the materials that we purchased have gone up in price exponentially. Even the trees that we've agreed to plant have gone up from, we used to get them for about $40 a plant. Now we're talking about more than $100, and to get them immediately, we're having to go all the way to New Jersey and truck them up here because there's no more arborvitaes or cypress left in the state right now. So all these costs are getting increased, and now these delays that are coming from this tree cutting and pole issue have already probably cost us an end of the year close, which is going to cost us thousands of more dollars in liquidated damages. So we're taking just more hits than this project can handle at this point. So I really hope we can come to a resolution. I'd like to answer any questions. And again, we're happy to plant trees. We find that's a win-win, low-cost solution that everybody agrees upon. But, any other delays are going to really hurt our bottom line. So I'm going to give it back to questions.
Yeah, just one comment. I watched a lot of the hearings that you're talking about with the planning board. And, I was also involved with another solar project that we had. And we ended up with, luckily, only one person with glare. And I was told that they don't glare. Well, I guess they do, with the right time. I know I was under I didn't realize you said you've agreed now to plant even more trees than you had before. You said for the neighbors that are there that have been complaining over the last, few months, they're getting glare. And I guess it's a real problem for them. So
yeah. So we've agreed in email. I'm saying it in a public setting. We have told them repeatedly we will plant trees, and we will stick by that. We already have put a reminder in our calendars that the trees will be ordered and installed once the frost heals, or the frost goes away so we can ensure, healthy plants. I don't think it's a bad idea to plant trees, on the cusp of winter here, but
Okay, Dean, I saw you, and Corey, and then Jeff. Okay. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir. I just had one question. When this project was before the planning board and the zoning board, did the subject of the tree removal across the street come up at all?
So the location of the poles were clearly depicted on the plans, as were the wires. I think it was obvious there was going to be trees cut. I was taken aback by the 60 number, and when I went there and saw how far back that some of those trees were marked, I think that was a surprise to this board. It was a surprise to me how big the impact was. But at the time, I mean, it seemed obvious if you're putting poles in that right of way that there was going to be some tree removal, and that was going to be a consequence of moving the poles across.
Yeah, I didn't watch the hearing, but it sounds as though there was no specific conversation about the tree removal or the number of trees during those hearings.
Not that I can recall.
But
no.
it was presumably sounds as though it was implicit that there were going to be trees removed.
Right, they were clearly depicted on the approved site plans. Again, this was 18 months ago, so
Yeah.
I can't say
But
definitively
those-
if it was discussed, but I don't recall specifically, no.
Is it safe to say that either or both of those boards knew that the poles were going on I'm calling it the south side, I guess it's,
I do recall very clearly, and I can promise you that the poles being moved to that side of the street were discussed as part of the public hearing.
okay. Thank you very much.
Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, thank you for your patience in this. I understand, you got a lot of numbers flying around with the business proposal. You have a job to do, we have a job to do. So I do appreciate your patience on that. Going back over the tapes, my read on this is the placement of the poles is in response to concerns that the neighbors had for a previous proposed location. So that's what we would have wanted, I guess, from the conversation anyway. We're looking for what the neighbors' input is and respond to their needs and desires and, make it better for their neighborhood. So, and of course, I've said I would love to do things underground. I recognize there's a heavy cost with that. I also recognize, too, if you're looking at that area, even the underground infrastructure would interrupt some of those trees. So, just accepting that information, the only thing, just for my peace of mind, I would look for a 2-year maintenance agreement just to make sure those trees last and everything. Outside of that, I appreciate the patience you've put into this. Obviously we're going to hear from the public and everything. I'm more supportive of it now than I was, previous public hearing session. So as long as we could get like a 2-year agreement on the maintenance to make sure that everything thrives and lasts, I'm more comfortable with moving forward with this. So.
Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Gerber, was it?
Serber.
Server, okay,
Yep.
well, thank you, that was excellent background. I appreciated your input on your reaching out to the neighbors and taking their concerns into consideration and actually acting upon them. I understand that, it's been a while since you've teed this up in the town of Chatham and that you're anxious to get going, and I share your anxiety. I would have hoped that we were replaced with more than 30 trees, but now that the arborist here has explained kind of what the deal is in terms of tree replacement and shrubs working in concert and having them create a barrier, I think that will be sufficient over time. I'm much more attuned to the plan and the notion that you've actually explained what you're planning. When the detail we got with all the Latin names, I had no idea what you guys were planning. It sounds as though they're fairly indigenous, even though there's some dogwoods there, and dogwoods do okay in Chatham, but typically we love our scrub oaks and our pines. But it sounds like a pretty good plan to me, not being an arborist. I do want to hear from the public, and this is a public hearing, but I really do appreciate your input and your patience as well, has been echoed by fellow board members here. So
Right.
I'd love to hear from the public.
Thank you so much, and I'll be sitting right here if you have further questions. Thank you.
Yeah, you can sit down and then we'll see what the public says when we'll come back. I know that there's a representative from the Friends of Tree here, Dan Young. I talked to him as he came in. You come up, and then anyone else in the audience want to speak? Okay, you'll be next when Dan's done. Welcome, Dan.
Welcome. Thank you, and good evening. My name is Dan Young, and I'm a board member of Chatham's Friends of Trees. Friends of Trees is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the physical aspects of Chatham by planting and maintaining trees, as well as providing grants to local nonprofits that share our mission. We also endeavor to educate the public on the important role trees play in Chatham's environment. Thank you again for the opportunity tonight to submit questions, comments, and concerns regarding the proposed removal of 60 trees along Middle Road. Friends of Trees has two main concerns. The first being the loss of 60 native oak and pine trees, and the second is an adequate level of mitigation because of their removal. We first ask, these questions. Is the town of Chatham and the select board satisfied that it has received an adequate explanation from Eversource as to why the existing poles on the north side of Middle Road leading out to Route 137 cannot be used? Second is, has there been an adequate explanation provided by Eversource as to why burying the line is not an option, especially in light of the expenses incurred by Eversource to clean up after the most recent nor'easter? Is it absolutely necessary to remove all 60 trees? Is it possible to, let's say, only prune some of the trees, especially the oaks, and still perform the work? Additionally, Friends of Trees has these comments and concerns with the proposal as it is currently stated. Trees, specifically native tree species, provide important benefits to the community that include stormwater absorption, shade, moderation of temperature, carbon storage, and improved air quality. For example, a commonly used tree value calculator, yes, this does exist, states that an oak 15 inches in diameter will intercept and prevent annually the runoff of 1,668 gallons of stormwater and 593 pounds of atmospheric carbon dioxide. At the Middle Road location, the trees are also part of the vegetated buffer zone, screening the view of the transfer station. Native trees, of which oaks are a keystone species, provide important habitat for wildlife. This means they support the greatest diversity of wildlife, and loss of these native trees and damage to the surrounding understory also means a loss of habitat and the native species that depend upon them. Insects, butterflies, moths, songbirds, turkeys, to just name a few. Besides the native oaks and pines, the existing understory plants are predominantly native. The Eversource planting plan contains predominantly non-native species. We strongly object to the mitigation planting plan as proposed. We question the appropriateness of these species from both a horticulture and aesthetic perspective. Whatever is planted here should blend into the area, and the plan should incorporate native species appropriate for naturalizing and be beneficial to native wildlife. As an example, Coosa dogwood does not accomplish this. We would also like to see a plan that includes all native plants that will naturalize the area, blend into the surroundings, and support wildlife. To our second concern, we feel the amount of mitigation is inadequate. For every 2 trees removed, Eversource is proposing to plant just 1 tree, and 120 small shrubs are also proposed, and the shrubs do not provide the same value as the native trees being removed. While the roadside may offer little opportunity to plant a sufficient number of replacement native trees, there are other areas in town where new trees can be planted to offset some of the biomass, tree canopy, and cover removed from Middle Road. As an alternative, perhaps Eversource could provide a grant to the town for planting of trees elsewhere. We also know that newly planted trees require at least 3 years of care to ensure survival. This means regular watering during the growing season. A 1-year guarantee appears insufficient. Additionally, disturbed areas also provide an opportunity for non-native invasive species, such as bittersweet, to get established. We encourage the Select Board to ask for a greater assurance that plantings survive beyond 1 year. In summary, if the Select Board feels it has sufficient information to allow the proposal to be approved, we ask that it be subject to a revised planting of all native species appropriate for the site, that the proposed volume of plant material is closer to a 2-to-1 ratio, and that maintenance, watering, and invasive species control be at least 3 years. And Friends of Trees is committed to work with the town and Eversource in assuring a meaningful mitigation. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Dan. We had one other person in the audience that
Mr.
wanted to
Chairman?
speak.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
may I
I'm
ask a
sorry.
question? May I ask a question?
Dan, please come back. Yeah, thank you.
Excuse me. I've lost my voice tonight, I'm sorry. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
We received a letter today from the Friends of Trees essentially saying what you said. I would request that that letter be entered into the record, Mr. Chairman. I had a question.
Sure.
With respect to the oak trees, how tall do these oak trees get that you're talking about that you would prefer be there, I guess?
Yes, that is our preference. I mean, they are slow growing. You know, ultimately, you know, the native species could get, 50, 60, 70 feet tall.
Yeah.
And again, but these trees then will have been there to obtain that height. They will have been there generations.
Is it your thought that some of these trees, you heard my question, because I know you were in the room
Yes.
before, about the trees bending on over into the street. Are those trees you think should stay there? Some of these trees that are not growing straight up?
I would have to look at, and we would have to look at those specific trees. I mean, if safety is an issue, obviously
Yeah.
that those should be removed.
Yeah, there's perhaps an aesthetic issue too, as you drive down the street. But no, thank you. Those are my questions. I appreciate your
Okay.
Hang on, Dan.
comments.
Sure.
Just one question, and others may have to chime in on this. So, when you talk about the mitigation, number of trees that are being, planted in replacement of the trees that are going to be removed, if I heard correctly from one of the previous speakers, there's going to be other trees planted mainly for screening, but other elements on the project. We don't have an exact count on those number of trees. Would those trees help you appease your concern about the number of plants in the mitigation plan, even though they're not exactly in the scope of work? They're within the project itself, so close by for environmental impacts. Would that help ease some of your concerns about the number of, or the mitigation plan itself?
Well, the number is good, but they aren't native species. If I understood correctly your question, like for instance, the cedar trees that I think you had mentioned are not, are not native. Right, but the juniper red cedars are native, but
All right.
again, slow growing.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, I had a question on that
Sure.
also. Okay, thank you, Dan. And we have another person that wants to speak. Please, introduce yourself when you get up. Welcome.
Excuse me. I'm Jane Harris, and I'm here as an individual citizen of the town. And I certainly don't have much at all to add to the wonderful presentation by the Friends of Trees. However, I do support and want to echo their sentiments. The proposal for the removal of 60 trees actually includes 45 oaks. Oaks, as you may know, is the backbone of the Cape's landscape and ecology. As my previous speaker here said, they provide moderation of temperature, they act as wind screens, they provide all kinds of wildlife habitat, and for me, they're very important in the role of sequestering and storing carbon. As such, they play a really important role in Chatham's resilience to climate change. So I believe that the Board of Selectmen should at least require an alternatives analysis whereby the comparative value of below grade and above grade is presented so we really know whether or not it would be a net benefit or not. So because this is on town land, I just think that that would be a benefit. It's something that we will be looking at moving forward, as I believe, as we try to refine our adaptation plans. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Eversource or Next Grid, any comments?
Yes, so I'd just like to respond that we would like to provide, we have room to provide trees up on the ledge. The neighbors want additional trees. And if we can get our hands on some oak, which we haven't been able to in other instances, we'd be willing to plant a number of oaks up on that ridge in front of, so it would be the homes, then the arborvitaes, and then oaks in front of that facing the solar facility, because that's where we have room to plant them. But again, we've already installed our entire solar facility. We've already purchased the land, and now we have an asset sitting there not making money. And so to go through a lengthy alternatives investigation for us is not acceptable solution right now. We'd much rather just go ahead and plant some additional trees on our land and move this forward because time is what's really important to us at this stage.
Go ahead, Dean, and then I have a question to you.
Just one question, if you can remember back to the hearings, especially before the planning board, was the subject of underground utility location discussed at all?
So it was not discussed, just the location of the poles, as I said, but at our last hearing, Eversource stated that even if the poles were going underground, the trees would still need to be cleared
Right.
to accommodate. So
Yeah, I was just trying to
Yeah.
ascertain whether the planning board in its decision-making had considered that, that's all.
yeah, again, these were going on in 2019 and then January and February of 2020, so it's
Thank you.
hard to remember every detail.
Thanks.
Anything else? You said, let me understand, how many trees are you planting now that were not part of the agreement with the planning board? I remember the discussion on the buffer zone.
Yeah.
How much you were going to clear. During the meeting, before the planning board decided, there were a number of trees that you said, okay, we're going to put them up at a certain area. And now you're now going beyond that. How many more
Sure.
trees is that, and when do you expect that to get done?
So we planted about 40 trees on Middle Road already, and then we're planting native species around our ponding basin. We have been unable at this point to obtain native trees right now. It's been really hard to work with nurseries because so many people are planting and building and everything like that. So that's the only part of our project that hasn't been completed, is the native plants on the ponding basin. Additionally, we had a side agreement that was not reflected in the approved site plans with one of the abutters to plant 80 trees up on the ridge. And then additionally, we're going to continue that tree line for some additional abutters that have raised concerns. So if we're talking about arborvitaes every essentially 8 feet, but in a zigzag, so every 4 feet, We're talking about at least 80 more arborvitaes. And again, if we can get some small oaks, I don't know if we can afford to plant giant oaks, but if we can get some plants and foster them and help them grow in that area, it's much better than a lengthy alternative process for us.
And the last group of trees you're talking about was not part of the original plan.
None of those trees on the ridge were in the approved site plan. Those are all on an
And what-
agreement we came to with one of the abutters.
What do the neighbors, what's their expectation on when you're going to be able to plant the trees? Just
So we planted 80 of them already. Some of them fell during the nor'easter, so we're having to go do work up there again because the nor'easter ended up happening like 6 days after we planted those trees on the ridge. And then in my last email to the abutter, who I won't say her name, but the abutter that's been emailing me, we said that we could plant them now, but we'd rather wait until spring so they'd have a higher likelihood of surviving, and she responded that that was okay. So, it has to do with weather and the cold, but, likely it's end of March is where we anticipate being able to plant trees safely again.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I totally get why the south side is the side of choice here, and I think you've been attentive to the concerns of the abutters and the folks that live in Middle Road. And I think you've also been attentive to the need to plant trees. I'm interested in hearing more about how many oaks you're going to plant up there beside the solar array, 10, 20, 30, small oaks or whatever. I'm also attuned to the Friend of Trees, and I understand the importance of native oaks to our environment here. That's what we have. Squirrels, all sorts
Sure.
of wildlife, happens there.
So
But
until I walked in- sorry.
just a couple of things. I get very comfortable with this plan if you said you were going to plant another, 30 oaks or small oaks up there near your solar array, number one. Number two, I get really comfortable with the plan if you and Mr. Sellers said that, you're going to guarantee the health of these plants going forward for 3 years. And I think you got a done deal. So I'd like to hear from Eversource, and I'm already informed that you've already done a lot of mitigation here that I frankly wasn't aware of until this evening, so I appreciate that. And I have no issue with being on the south side whatsoever. I understand that. I think you've gone out of your way to satisfy the abutters and the folks that live on Middle Road, so I'm very comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I think that was a concern that the Friend of Trees aired as well. So if you could give us some kind of notion that you're going to plant more oaks, and I'm saying, I'm making it up, but, plant.
Well, I would like to talk to Friends
Okay.
of Trees because we're having trouble, like I said, procuring oaks
Okay, but it's
at
not.
all. But yeah, we can plant, if we're talking about small oaks that will grow
They
into
will
big
grow.
oaks, we can certainly plant 20 oaks on that ridge in front of the arborvitaes. And we guarantee our plants through our operations and maintenance agreement that we filed with the town. So
Okay.
we have landscapers go and look at our
Okay.
trees, replace ones that have died. That's not a 1 or
Okay.
2 year commitment. That's part of the life of the project that you see in our operations and maintenance plan.
And that would include the oaks, should you plant the oaks, I'm anticipating in the springtime.
Right, so
Right,
those will be looked at by our operations and maintenance staff during their annual or as-needed visits. I cannot speak, obviously, for any of Eversource's
Okay.
ability or intention to guarantee trees.
But, I'm also appreciative of that time is of the essence, so you've been here for 2 or 3 years now, banging away at this, and at times, you want to recoup your investment. I
Yeah.
get it. Yeah, okay.
Again, Paul Sellers, Eversource. Yeah, just a couple of comments regarding the planting plan. The majority of the shrubs that we are proposing are native species. The trees, certainly, those are not. And part of the problem with doing a roadside utility landscape plantings and trying to find those trees that are in the sweet spot of 30 feet or under is we don't have a lot of native species here in the Northeast that fit that criteria. That being said, we're certainly more than happy to, work hand in hand with the Friends of Trees, Dan Tobin, our tree warden, and augment the species list. We're not, dead set on the plant material that we have in here. Selfishly, those are a lot of my favorite trees, so that's why I picked them. So, and they're ones that we see often and more. Arguably, urban landscape, urban plantings, streetscape type plantings. So we're more than happy to revisit that and come up with a plan. Even the final number in that count, when we get out there and we start laying the plants out and we see that we need 2 more trees here or 5 more shrubs there, that can still be kind of a fluid thing. We don't want to leave it open-ended, of course. That would be a bit irresponsible on my part, but we can certainly accommodate those types of requests. The 3-year guarantee of the shrubs and trees survival, that's fine. The longer we maintain these and continue to look after them, the further they're going to be established. We'll see less and less maintenance, quite frankly, on our side of the house as we get into the 3rd year. There was a mention about planting trees in other areas. We've done some work a number of years past. I'm not sure anyone from Friends of Trees was on the board at that time, but we did do planting with the Friends of Trees in the town of Chatham for previous tree removal projects that we've done. And we also still have available to the Friends of Trees or any communities that are out there grants that are available through the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Eversource Go Green grant. So that being part of our ongoing efforts to plant trees. So we would love to work with our Friends of Trees on this project and outside of it. So I think we share the same concerns.
You craft something, Jeff?
So I move approval of the poles being placed in the vegetation plan, the site, pending a 3-year maintenance plan post-planting, and pending also working with the Friends of Trees and deciding on oaks to be planted on the next gen site and elsewhere if we can possibly fit them in along the south side of Middle Road. Oaks grow really strong and tall here, even though the wind whips around. So we have oaks in our yard that are 70 feet tall. So it takes some time, but they're our treat. So we can fit as many of them in as we can. We'd really like to do that. But I understand time is of the essence. There's an enormous investment here, and it's time to move this on. And I don't really want to have another hearing about it. I think we can get to an agreement with Friends of Trees and all of us. So,
Dean?
I don't know if that's a motion, but it is a motion. I don't know if it's been seconded, but I wanted to comment on it.
it is a motion. It was rather inarticulate, but it is a motion.
Well, I guess
I had 3 years.
before
Within 3 years.
before seconding it, I just wonder if it needs to be that particular. And I wanted to ask, may I ask a question first?
Sure.
Because I did ask Mr. Young about the height of the oak trees. Can you live with oak trees under those lines? I mean, you're getting rid of some of these trees because they could interfere with the utility lines, right?
I'm not sure I'm following your question. You mean the trees that we propose planting underneath the line?
Mr. Dykens just indicated as one of the conditions, as it were, in his motion that you try to put some oak trees on the south side where the lines are.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that part.
You're going to be removing oak trees, right? Can you put oak trees there?
We would not advocate for that. That would be counterproductive for us, especially 2 weeks ago, we had a lot of oak trees hit our line, so.
So because they get too tall?
Correct.
Okay. I just really wanted to get that point.
Yeah, the mitigation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would.
May I suggest an alternative motion? I mean, yours hasn't been seconded yet. Do we really want to put all these particulars in the motion? Or do we want to just prove this as was submitted with the understanding, and the motion could say that, with the understanding that Eversource and the solar array folks would collaborate with the Friends of Trees to try to come up with a plan that meets concerns that have been expressed tonight about.
Can I just add
Oak
one
trees and
thing
so
to that
forth.
before you start? To me, the issue isn't whether you put the oaks there. It's whether you have oaks that are mitigate against the oaks you're taking down. They don't have to be under the poles or by the poles. They can be over on the solar side where Next Grid said they put them.
I guess I would just ask Mr. Dykens if he wouldn't mind refining his motion if you want to have some particulars, including the placement of oaks at the solar array property, that would be fine. I'm a little concerned about putting oaks on the south side of the street because of the interference with the lines.
Right, and in my motion, I would withdraw that suggestion or that requirement, if you will, that condition, but have oaks planted at the Next Gen site, as he's explained, next spring, that would mitigate some of the removal of the oaks on the south side.
And let us not forget the three-year maintenance.
And with a three-year maintenance plan. And I understand Mr. Sellers when he says if you get them through 2 years, it's likely that the need for maintenance will decrease over time because they're becoming mature and planted, et cetera, so.
Donna, do you
anyway,
understand what the motion is?
A motion by Select Board Member Dykens to move the approval of the pole placement and vegetation planting plan pending a 3-year vegetation maintenance plan and work with the Friends of Trees on planting oaks on the next grid site.
I didn't hear it. Did it have the 3 years in there?
Yeah, she had 3 years.
Okay, I missed it.
So it's just the oaks, and working with the Friends of Trees on the oaks and have 3 years. There's not, I heard more volunteered that they would work with Friends of Trees on the south side. Is that, do you want that in the motion?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm not taken back by that. We're more than willing to work with the Friends of Trees on
Okay.
finalizing the plant selection for the south side.
So you're going to add that to your motion, Mr.
That's fine,
Dykens?
yep.
I'll second your motion, thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay? You guys are okay?
Yes, sir.
Friends of Trees? All right, let's have a vote on the motion. Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Congratulations, gentlemen. This is, and ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me tell you, this is the way it should be done. Very good compromise. Thank you. All right. Now I have public comments on our following business agenda items, one being first night, next are Select Board goals and objectives, and then our budget summit. Any comments or comments on those items? See none on virtually, no one in the hall. Okay, Mr. Stuka, we'll start with first night.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Paul Stuka, and I'm the chairman of First Night Chatham. I'd be happy to give you a summary of what we are attempting to do this year. I would be happy to answer questions, however you prefer.
Okay, I have to make an announcement first, though. I have volunteered it with First Night. I've also been on the board a couple of years ago, but all I am is a volunteer now when it's needed. Does anybody on the board want to hear anything more? Corey, go ahead.
Oh, I do have a question about one of the emails. Outside of that, everything looks pretty straightforward, so.
Okay, why don't we just do that unless, does anybody want to go through the, why don't you just generally hit it, especially the times that they've changed this year?
Okay. This will be a different first night as opposed to previous years. It's called Special Main Street Edition. It's going to be all outdoors. It'll be over a limited time period this year. It'll commence at noon with the town photo at the Coast Guard station, and it will end at 5:30 with the fireworks, if we're approved, at Veterans Field. The noise parade will precede the fireworks at 5 o'clock, and in between 12 and 4:30, we'll have various entertainers and games along Main Street between Chatham Bars Ave and the Rotary.
Okay, Corey.
Just one logistic question based on an email. So the event's going to have a proposal of 2 food trucks. One's going to be stationary or staying at the town hall. And then one, this is where my question comes in, is going to start at Cape Gould Park and then later move to the community center parking lot for the fireworks. Is that going to go in a designated parking space? Is it going to go on the green space like it's?
We'll be working with Dan. I think Dan left the room, but we'll be
Okay, I was
working
wondering
with Dan on that.
because obviously there could be some foot traffic in that area. How is that going to get set up? Is it going to be coned off? I'm just trying to understand the logistics of that element.
We anticipate it would be coned off so they could get access. In the past, I believe they parked on the lawn at the community center.
Right on the sidewalk a little bit.
In that case, they actually needed access to power.
Right.
I'm not sure at this point whether that's necessary or whether they're self-contained.
Okay.
The only thing I'd amend your statement, Corey, is we may have 3 food trucks. If we add a third, it would be at the town hall parking lot. So basically, it would be 1 or 2 at Town Hall, and then 1 in the parking lot at Kate Gould Park, which we anticipate moving, if possible, through the back way down to the community center.
And I would assume at the town hall parking lot, like in the past, they're using the spots right up by the building.
Correct.
Not in the interior. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody, anyone else? Jeff?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the use of town-owned resources and services and the request for sales on town property, outdoor display sale of goods for Chatham First Night activities on December 31st, 2021.
Second? Second. Okay, get any comments? Go for a vote. Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Well, Chair says aye. Congratulations.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up is our Select Board Town Manager Goals and Objectives. Jill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So tonight, we wanted to kick off the upcoming fiscal year and calendar year goals and objectives. And in your packet, you have the value statements that the board had approved during the last goal-setting cycle. And in particular, we did add one about prioritizing protect the environmental quality of the town and the drinking water supply. And this was done when the board reviewed the status report and reprioritized on July 13th, 2021. So tonight, what you have in your packet is a status report of where we are with the goals that were previously established in November 24th, 2020. And some highlights show what was reprioritized or prioritized. And we have a few items that are still pending. So the process has been before with the board to complete a worksheet on top 5 priorities for the select board and for the town manager. You return that sheet to Shauna in our office, and depending on the results that we get, it could be just a couple of requests for new goals or consideration of finishing out or completing the pending prior year goals. So these don't necessarily go away. Again, they're organized by goal category under your value statements. And tonight's discussion was to kick it off. And in the past, we've had a separate goal-setting workshop. It's typically been a Saturday workshop. But I think if we see what comes back to us on December 3rd, that was the date that we have on the sheet, then we can decide if we need a designated meeting or if it could just be an agenda item in a regular meeting. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any comments? Dean?
Thank you, Jill. So on the worksheet, we could include items that are already here, for example.
Yes.
I mean, I'm looking, for example, at paid parking downtown, which is something I would hope we could consider in anticipation of next season, because we might be able to tap into some significant revenues. And I like the idea of, depending on what comes in and how it's ascribed to the different categories, we may not have to have that Saturday 2-hour session, because we've done them now several years in a row, and they do get a little repetitive. And we do add some new things from time to time, and they've been worthwhile, but we may not need one this year. Okay. When do you want these back?
So if you could either drop them off or email them December 3rd
Okay.
to Shauna, and that it's actually noted on the worksheet.
All right, thanks.
One other thing that I wanted to note too is that this is your goals and objectives for the town, for your consideration, but also it does need to be carried through to the boards and committees. So that's something to consider as you're looking at this, and if there's anything new, if you want a various committee or board to concentrate on something, that's something that we should highlight in here, because staff time could be specifically designated for that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I want to make sure that you set the goals for the community, and then the implementation could be through the boards and committees and definitely through staff.
You know, I thank you for saying that, because I know that the Energy and Climate Action Committee is moving in a little bit different direction. That's something I have to talk to them about. So, I mean, as far as goals and objectives. So, anybody else? Jeff?
No, it sounds like a good plan, and I think there'll be, I suspect there'll be some agreement on goals and objectives for the board. There'll be some, repeat items as well. They'll continue, and perhaps we won't have to have the 2-hour meeting as Select Board Member Nacastro just mentioned.
Yeah,
I've already kind of filled it out, and there's a lot of repeats here.
Yeah, I agree. I like goals, objectives, and metrics. They're hard to do, and you can't always reach them, but the point is you have them. So it's a direction. Dean asked the same question I was. You want me to put the same things down I put down the last time? Yes, the answer is right. Yeah, okay.
Yes, or mark up the status if you want, circle or whatever you want to do to make it easier for you to submit them. That's really easy too.
Okay. All right, you don't need a vote or anything on this, no. Okay, thank you. Next, we go to the Budget Summit. And Alex, I see Alex is on virtually. Hi, Alex, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Yes, the board had the budget, we had the Budget Summit back in October, and there were several items that the board had requested for follow-up. Those were the revenues, town employment vacancies, and also the percentage of CPA funds that would be used for affordable and/or attainable housing. So in your packet tonight, I've provided a report, and I'll run through this for the public and for your information, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on any of the items in here. As you know, the department heads will be submitting their budgets due this Friday, and then we'll be coming back to the board over the months of December in advance of the January presentation to the board of the town manager's budget. So we'd like to, just address some of these items now in advance of that. So first of all, we had talked about revenues and the fact that free cash closed quite high this year at $8.6 million. And a lot of that was due to revenues stronger than forecasted. And again, we were conservative with our revenues for the FY 2021 budget, not knowing what the pandemic would have brought. Again, tourism, hotel, motel, meals tax was very strong in FY 2021, particularly the increase of the room occupancy tax to the short-term rentals. So that brought in over $2.1 million in excess of what was estimated for the total room occupancy, covering both short-term and traditional revenues. At the Budget Summit, there was mention of the percentage, the room occupancy tax that Chatham does charge. We charge a 4% local tax of room occupancy. You can raise that up to 6% maximum. As noted in the packet, other Cape towns have done this recently, and currently only Chatham, Falmouth, Harwich, and Sandwich are less than 6%, although Harwich has just voted to increase that local share to 6%, which will be effective January 1st, 2023. Also in your packet, I've shown what the additional 2% would mean if Chatham were to adopt it. And just as a note to the public and to the board, to remind the board, this takes a simple vote of town meeting. So we don't need to have a home rule petition to the legislature. It's an option that is always open, and we've pointed this out in the past at the budget summits. However, no action has been taken previously. So again, if we look back over 5 years, had we adopted the additional 2%, a potential of $3.6 million in additional revenue would have been raised. So again, looking at that. So another portion of that discussion is if we were to raise the short-term rent, or short-term, raise the hotel motel tax from 4% to 6%, what to do with that excess revenue. I mean, that's additional revenue coming to the town. Would the board want to segregate that into a special purpose revenue fund, such as affordable attainable housing, wastewater, capital improvements, or have it closed to the general fund? And I've, highlighted these items as discussion items of whether or not to dedicate a portion if the board is looking to propose this to town meeting, to restrict the revenue for a special purpose, or to have it close to the general fund, which gives you options to address items as future items and priorities might change. So I think I'll pause right there to answer any questions you might have on revenues.
Yeah, I have one, and then I'll go to Dean, a couple. that 762,000 if for an additional, for FY '22, is that for the whole year? Is that what you're expecting?
No, that would be for the first quarter, so we
First
received
quarter, okay.
1.5, yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be higher than that. Let's see. I remember a year ago when we were looking at projecting what our revenues would be. We agonized over what the percentage should be. You normally use, 80% of last year's revenues. And, it was as low as, and I'm going to say potentially 40%, and then we talked about it for a while. We brought it up to 60, and we were really worried about it. We thought we were on the edge, and we actually did very well. So, I mean, there's a lot of free cash there, but it's not because we just, decided to not think very, conservatively. And I think we went from very conservative to conservative, but we're still ahead. The other part on the 2%, Mr. Nicastro brought up a point that during the discussions maybe 2 years ago or so, there weren't any other towns that were doing it, and now there are quite a few that are adding the 2%. And this is just a generalized thought process. We have the transfer tax that's up at legislature. Whether we'll get that or not, I don't know. But the question is, we need funding for affordable and attainable housing. That's, do we, but I'm sort of reluctant in one respect to try to put all 2%, if we decided to go ahead with 2%, put it all into an account like that. I think there's value in being able to have a reserve of some kind that you can get to, that you can apply where things happen and you don't know what's going on. So I think we have to discuss the 2%, whether we want to do it or not, but we have to do it in the context of maybe we're going to have money from either that, the 2% transfer, or the other one is the CPA funds. We know, the odds, we don't know what the odds are on that. I don't know when we're going to know. We may know in what, a month or two or a year. So that's kind of the context I put in. We have time to discuss that, but at least those are my thoughts. Dean was up next. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, so just to clarify, on the first chart that you have, you're showing in the final column at the bottom, second to last line, $762,000. So do I read this to mean that if we were to have a short-term rental tax for FY22 in place, and we're in FY22 now, that's how much additional money we would take in for the whole year?
No, that is the 2% extra from the traditional and short-term rental tax that would have been received based on the September receipts. So I'm expecting that to increase even more because we're still going to get December, March, and June. So that's only based on the first quarter receipts.
So for the whole year, if we had an additional 2%, so we're up to 6%, for the whole of FY22, what would the projection be in terms of the additional amount of money we would get?
Okay, in your packet, you can see for FY 2021, we would have received an extra $1.3 million, just under that.
Okay. So back when the Finance Committee, Alex, you'll remember this, I think, and the chairman just alluded to it, when the Finance Committee had a subcommittee that I chaired that looked into extending the short-term rent, the hotel motel tax to short-term rentals. There were two particular reasons why we didn't do it. One was, as Peter said, other towns hadn't gone up, and there was a concern that we would lose short-term rentals to these other towns. The other was because it required special legislation, and the legislature wasn't too keen on passing something like that for an individual town. But now, they did extend the hotel motel tax to cover short-term rentals. And now, as has been mentioned, our surrounding towns have gone up to 6%. So it does seem to me that we should perhaps, Mr. Chairman, put this on a future agenda before we, as we approach the annual meeting warrant for consideration, because I'm sure there will be multiple people in town who will have an interest in weighing in on this, including the Chamber of Commerce, the Merchants Association. I think there was a lodging association. I don't know how active they are. But I think it's worth talking about. And as far as earmarking it, I'm not a great fan of earmarks. I've said that publicly, but if it's going to bring in an additional $1.3 million, it's worth thinking about potentially earmarking a portion of it, not all of it, a portion of it for whatever, affordable, attainable housing, that sort of thing. I'm less objecting to something like that because the tax is already in place than I am in creating new taxes. So I'm open to that idea. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Jeff?
Yeah, I appreciate those thoughts, and I do echo them. I absolutely think it ought to be an agenda item. I think it's a viable course of action for the town. I think we need to do it with some study and some thought and solicit opinion and other thoughts. I don't share Selectman Nicastro's reluctance to earmark, especially for affordable and attainable housing. But I also want to throw in the mix that it's likely we're going to have an extra ask of about $600K for the elementary school, thereabouts, that we also are going to need to fund. So I'm very interested in seeing, our doing a study and ultimately coming to a decision, because I think Alex and Jill deserve some kind of direction on what we'd like to do. And I think the sooner we have that discussion, the sooner we get it out there, the better. And so I very much support putting it on the agenda. And 1.3, and you note that the bolus of the money is collected, in the first quarter, July to September, and it falls off after that. So, you sit here licking your chops, but looks as though we're probably going to come close to another 1.3, I would think, this year as well. And so we are foregoing some considerable revenues, and I really think we need to give it some study. So thank you. And the fact that Harwich went and all the other surrounding towns have already gone, I think is indicative of the trend. Thank you.
No, I would very much welcome some public input on this. I mean, this is not a brand-new discussion, so we've had some level of this already in the past. But I would be more inclined to earmark the money for affordable, attainable housing because, we're looking at this, we're seeing homes gobbled up for investment purposes for short-term, and we're losing affordable, attainable housing. We've lost affordable, attainable housing at such a great level. That if we could use this as a mechanism to help try to claw back at that loss, I would be more supportive of that philosophically, because we're in a tough situation right now, and to get back our affordable, attainable housing, at least some reliable level, it's going to take some time and money, and some efforts. So earmarking some of these funds or most of these funds is not something I'm very much I would be opposed to. I'd be very supportive of. So, make it as an agenda item. Let's have some solid discussion on it. Get as much input as we can on it. The only comment I would like, or a question I would like to make is, obviously we can go up to 6%. I was just more curious why Falmouth is at 5. Why did they? I'm not looking for an answer right now, but it was more of an observation that, everyone's jumping from 4 to 6, 4 to 6, 4 to 6, and Falmouth went to 5. So I don't know what their philosophy was behind that, but it's more of an observation. So thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Any other comments? No? Okay, Alex, go ahead.
Thank you. So we'll look at that for a future agenda, and we can get all the information for you for the agenda report. I also noted in the report that we do still have those Harwich IMA funds, the $2.265 million that closed to free cash. So if you're looking at additional revenues and restricting those for a special purpose, we note this because those Harwich IMA funds will be coming again in the future, and that was specifically from the wastewater, and we had brought up the wastewater capitalization fund previously, which was voted down at town meeting, and I think that should be part of a conversation if you're looking at earmarking some of the future revenues from the short term, from the room occupancy tax. So just a comment. And speaking of wastewater, the other item that we wanted to follow up on was the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund, which is the 2.75% added on to the room occupancy tax, both for short-term and traditional lodging. So the town of Chatham will receive the following, a subsidy over the next 4 years for current projects, contingent projects, and then 25% for pre-existing debt of $8.6 million. So we're looking at getting those funds in to help reduce the amount of debt service that we need to pay. And the first subsidy will be under the Clean Water Trust Loan 1824, which will close in May of 2022. And the subsidy amount on that loan for the first year is $510,928.75. Actually, for the entire loan. So that is starting to come in, and we'll keep you updated as we get more closings and loans, and those funds start flowing to the town. We have not seen them come in yet. So I'm happy to answer any questions if the board has any questions on those right now.
Yeah, Jeff has one, and then I have one.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I just want to be clear, when we receive these funds, are we going to immediately turn around and pay down water-related debt?
When we receive the funds, it is applied to the amount that we have to finance, so it will just come off the amount that we finance. So yes, it's applied to the debt.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the other part of that, Alex, and I know we talked about this just generally before. I understand we don't have the exact funding, how they're going to be spent. Is there a way to understand what they will be potentially in how you show our long-term debt? You know, you show a great chart that shows, capital, where it's going to go and all that. This hasn't been incorporated into it, and it would be nice to know that, because if you look at the capital debt we have for our infrastructure, especially for water and sewer, we get criticized that we're sort of in the middle, although that's not a bad place to be for how much money each taxpayer has. But we're paying water debt that other towns are just now beginning to get, and they're going to be even higher than us. So you don't always have a metric that you're going against the other town, but it's important for us to understand where our debt is, especially for things that are going to come in the future. Yeah, our coastal resiliency, we have affordable housing, the rents that's there, potentially for a senior center, whatever. It's just being nice to know how this $10 million is a nice chunk of money. It'd be nice to know how it's going to fit into our flow of debt. I'm sorry, Dean, go ahead.
No, that's a good point, Mr. Chairman, and I really wanted to ask Alex, since you brought this up, because it comes up all the time whenever we meet with the Finance Committee, what's the per capita debt in this town? Isn't it based on the year-round population?
That's correct.
And they don't factor in that we get 25 or 30,000 people for the summer season in town.
Yeah, I would point out that when Standard & Poor's, our rating agency, looks at our debt, it is high based on the year-round population. However, when you factor in the part-time and summer residents, it is what they consider adequate and moderate. So the Standard & Poor's has not raised a concern about that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Good point, thanks, Dean. Okay.
And just to answer a question on this, again, as an example, for the loan that will close in May, the subsidy of $510,000 is the amount that the town will not have to pay back. So we're getting that grant on the overall financing over the 20 years of that loan.
Okay.
So it's basically a grant similar to the ERA funds that we received previously on one of our loans that, we will not have to pay that back. And we redo those schedules as these funds are applied to the loans that we are approved for through the Clean Water Trust.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments or questions? Jeff?
Alex, is that the same for the pre-existing debt subsidy, the $8.6 million? Are we going to handle that the same way? Or is that going to be a direct offset, or is that going to be, it's going to be paid over 10 years? How are we going to, how do we pay down debt?
I'm not sure how that's going to be handled. We're still waiting for guidance from
Okay.
the Cape Cod Islands Water Protection Management committee. So they voted that, but we haven't seen any schedule on how they're going to apply those funds back to the town yet.
Okay, thank you. Those are big numbers. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, Alex?
If you're satisfied on the debt, then we'll move on to the third item that was raised at the budget summit, which are the employee vacancies. So again, looking at the turnbacks, which we highlighted at the budget summit because that closes to free cash. And as you know, free cash closed was certified at $8.6 million, quite high, highest that I've ever seen here. And part of that was due to the turnbacks from both salary and wage line items and expense line items. But there was concern over the amount of turnbacks due to salaries, and a further review raised that from the $337,000 that I noted before to $368,486 for FY 2021. And I've broken that down by the different departments. So you can see there, by general government, just under $34,000, public safety, just under $80,000, community development about $15,000, natural resources $113,000, public works about $56,000, and community social services, namely the COA, just over $70,000. And the percentages are higher for the community and social services, the COA, because that is just one department. So it was almost 22% turnback. And much of this was due to the pandemic for the Council on Aging, where the bus drivers weren't taking people to appointments, et cetera, and being closed during the pandemic. However, we've listed some of the vacant positions because we did have a lot of vacancies not being able to hire people or turnover, where we hired new employees at lower levels than retiring employees who've been long serving. So I've listed all those vacancies here. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have in particular on those. But again, many of the programs, especially Recreation and Council on Aging, were canceled or closed and postponed due to COVID, which contributed to the turnbacks.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I raised this issue, and I thank you very much for getting back so quickly, Jill and Alex. And I raised it in the context of knowing how difficult the labor market is right now, and how I think we need to stay attuned to it, especially in certain areas like HR and the conservation agent, et cetera. Those are two critical positions, I believe, in the town that we need to fill as best we can. Totally get the Council on Aging and the community, the social services, totally get that. But there are some critical, I think, some critical positions that are unfilled that we need to focus on. How we go about that, I don't have a magic wand. I know for a fact this labor market is incredibly tight. It's very difficult to fill positions right now. Eventually, wages are going to go up. I believe it. I just think they are. The cemetery administrator, we need desperately. We'd like to fill that as soon as possible. That's been raised 2 or 3 times to me by the cemetery commissioners now, and we'll certainly be asking for to continue that funding for the budget going forward. So those are my comments. I raised it because I've never seen so many turnbacks and vacant positions prior. Anyway, those are my comments, my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Jill?
Mr. Chair, so we were fortunate to be able to fill the positions, the HR benefits administrator, collections assistant, media assistant. So most of the positions have been filled. The challenging positions have been the gate attendant at the transfer station, the cemetery administrator, who you alluded to, and there were interviews this week, and the program coordinator. We did have a great hire. She ended up leaving us, and it's interesting that the hires that we did through COVID, we actually didn't see them in person. So we did all of our interviews remote, reference checks and everything. So when they reported to work, it was a real welcoming sight. So I think we're okay. We do have some vacancies that are, again, as I said, a little challenging. And then, it's also a discussion to have at some point about what a workplace is. And there are some communities in the county that are offering remote work opportunities to some non-forward facing positions. So future work will be discussed with you and will be a hot topic for the next couple of months.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill. It sounds like we've made some progress. Thank you.
Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Jill, on the cemetery administrator, so you've got this as part-time. Are you resolved on that, or is there a possibility you might go full-time on that?
So right now, it's funded at a 15-hour per week. We are interviewing people. It could go up to 19 hours per week, but we have to do some reorganization. So those who are being interviewed are going to ask if they can work full-time and not necessarily be at the cemetery full-time, but maybe 3/4 time and then assist with the DPW or water. There's still a need for administrative support in
So they'd be a full-time employee of the town, but they would devote 19 hours approximately to the cemetery.
Yes, at least. So that's something that's still in play.
What's the status, I know this is brand new, of filling the council on aging? It's not even on this list because it's just happened. Mandy's position at the council on aging, the director.
Right, so right now we have Eva Orman serving as the interim director, and I was waiting to hear about the community forum and the board's discussion about where you wanted to go. It is a position that hasn't been just 100% to the COA. When Mandy was in the position, she also assisted with the Human Services Committee and was essential with some of the Chatham 365 initiatives and child care voucher programs. So there's a human services component to that. So right now we're reviewing it, hoping to figure out what the title should be and then get it advertised. But this isn't the best time to advertise, so we'll try to get it out in maybe early or mid-December for a deadline of mid-January or so.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Just one quick follow-up. Are wages competitive on the gate attendant in that arena, Jill?
I have to look at that further. Megan, our HR administrator, has looked at it. It's just a very challenging position because it's outdoors at the transfer station, but it also is really important. It might be the first person or first town employee that most people see. It's a pretty busy place, but also managing, cash and payments and so forth. So I believe there was an interview this week, and then I'll hear back from Megan next week about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it from the board. Alex?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jill, for clarifying those positions. The other item that the board had discussed at the budget summit was the percentage of CPA funds that should go to affordable and/or attainable housing. And just to remind you that the CPA statute requires that 10% of the funds be expended or reserved for housing, 10% for open space, and 10% for historic preservation. And then the remaining 70% can be allocated to any of those items as well as for recreation items. So again, last year the board, the CPC, Community Preservation Committee, did recommend $1 million to go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We will look to have community development present an application to the Community Preservation Committee for an amount to go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for FY 2023. And again, whether that is 70% or amount lower than that, we're not sure. I would like to report that we did get notification of the match from the state, which is over $500,000 this year. So we are looking forward to that soon. So we should have a sufficient balance to put money into affordable housing, as well as any of the other projects that are put forward by the Community Preservation Committee. We're still waiting to receive those projects and the applications, which are due on January 14th. Again, I haven't seen very much, so we're, as part of the budget process, we'll be looking for the departments to identify any of their capital items that might be funded through the CPC. So again, it is the Community Preservation Committee who has to make that recommendation through an application, usually coming from Community Development Department.
Thank you.
I also note in here that the town meeting approval of Article 64 for 127 Old Harbor Road. which could be eligible for community preservation funds under both the historic and the affordable housing categories, should that property be rehabbed as is, so to speak. So again, just pointing those out to the board, and would like to have some direction on what percentage you might want to see the Community Development Department request of the CPC.
Okay, Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Alex, on the community preservation funds, this current year, we got $1 million. What percentage of the available funds was that? Was that 70% or 80%? Was it in that ballpark? I'm just looking for an approximation.
I'd have to go back and look. We did receive over $1 million in revenues. We did draw down on the fund balances for quite a few of the projects. We had estimated, I think, $1.4 million in revenues. So that was quite a large percentage.
Yeah, so, I mean, this was the idea of tapping the CPA funds for 70% for affordable housing. We can't do attainable housing at this time because the statute doesn't permit it. But that was raised by Dr. Selden at the Joint Summit, and I supported that. I think others did as well. And I'd like to see us move in that direction. It would be a total of 80% because you have to put $100,000 into affordable housing anyway. And so I don't know whether, I mean, I know we're minus one select board member tonight, but maybe we shouldn't take any kind of vote on it. But I would certainly like to see us consider requesting the full 10% plus 70%, which would give us to 80% for affordable housing for FY23 in that budget. That's how I feel about it. And I guess I won't offer a motion tonight because we're short one board member, but I think that's the direction to go. But I asked that question because maybe 80% is less than $1 million. I don't know.
I believe that we're estimating about 1.5 million
So it'd be
coming
more
in
than.
for
So then I would go with the 80%.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. I mean, one other comment. I think it's interesting that the legislature assigned the CPA funding bill to the Housing Committee, not to the Revenue Committee, which I suspect gives it a more favorable chance. I don't know if anybody opposed it when it was heard. I didn't watch that hearing, so I don't know. But, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to reaffirm, and I think Alex just did or confirm that we'd have $1 million. You said there was going to be a $500,000 match as well. Is that how you got your 1.5, Alex?
We received $500,000 this year.
Okay.
So we're estimating, again, we always estimate conservative going forward, not knowing what's going to happen with the match for the state. But we are expecting about $1.5 million in estimated revenues for the CPC for FY 2023.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would agree. I think, it's our second highest, if you call it that, at least in my mind, is affordable housing, and the water was first. I mean, just generally. And we need cash to be able to buy the proper properties that we can get for affordable housing, use it, and for either property or to support affordable housing, contractors and so forth. And we need that, we need as much as we can up front to a point, obviously. So I'm in agreement with the direction of what the previous, Dean and Jeff has said. I mean, it makes sense if we can do it. Of course, it has to be looked at in the context of some of the other CPA funds, but as far as I can tell, it seems like the direction we should go in. Jeff?
Yeah, just to switch gears a little bit, what are the next steps on 127 Old Harbor Road, Alex and Jill, given the vote at town meeting? What kind of steps should we be considering?
Mr. Chair, so we had talked about having a work session with the Affordable Housing Trust Community Development had put in a grant for looking at engineering 127, but unfortunately, we didn't receive grant funds from the state. So I know this is a priority for the chair to have us have a meeting solely dedicated to affordable housing.
Okay, thanks, yep.
Okay. Anything else?
Alex, did I forget anything?
Hey, Alex?
No, I don't think so. Again, I just raised that because that was passed at town meeting and it could be eligible for CPC funds under the 2 categories. So I just wanted to remind the board of that, and that will be part of that larger conversation.
Okay, great. And thank you, Alex, and thank you, Jill, for keeping us informed like this. This is important. It's nice doing it in small bits as we go along. Okay, now we need to have a motion to move into executive session.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Dean.
I want to offer a motion to go into executive session under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Number 3, to discuss strategy regarding pending and threatened litigation, specifically 1, town joinder in multi-district PFAS litigation, and 2, collective bargaining strategy session, Chatham Municipal Employees Association, CMEA, and the chair declares that an open meeting would be detrimental to the litigating and negotiating positions of the public body with no return to open session.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay. I'll take a vote. Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Kmetters?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. And that completes it. Good night, Chatham.